All right, thank you very, very much. I'm Paul Bradley from TraceGains. I want to really thank everyone from Executive Platforms and thank all of you for choosing to join this session. I'm so impressed that there are this many people who actually have the appetite for one more AI-themed conversation in 2025. This is a brave group. So my job is to try and make that worth your while, and I'm going to do my best to do that, because what I'm going to talk about today is getting down to the nitty-gritty about driving real return on investment from AI. I think we are in an interesting place, and I'll talk about this, with sort of the AI hype cycle, if you will. So I think it's a great time to be talking about how do we get real with this technology and what can that really mean to all of us. Before I do that, I want to just give a huge shout out. We've been coming to NAFS for a long time, and we have an amazing list of TraceGains customers here. If you're part of this list, please come by the booth. We'd love to see you and catch up. If you're not on this list and you want the uncensored inside skinny on what it's like to work with us, these are the guys to go and talk to. So please connect and learn a little bit about what we do and how we can help. And again, we'd love to see everyone who's here with us today. So just by way of quick introduction, I am a technology guy by training my whole career. The bio is a lie. It's not 20 years. It's more like 30. I've been doing this for a long time. And that really is my background, although I've been in the food and beverage arena for a long time. Everyone in this room has deeper domain knowledge than I do when it comes to food safety. So what I'm going to try and do is stay a little bit in my lane and talk about the technology aspects, how the technology is growing and changing. And the reality is we are in, especially with artificial intelligence, kind of an interesting spot. And I'll say more about this in a minute. But a lot of things that seemed sort of breathlessly exciting and limitless possibilities a year ago are coming down to earth a little bit, right? We're seeing a little bit of critical analysis hitting the AI space. We're seeing some really good and I think really fair questions being asked about how, it's cool, it's neat, it's awesome. How do we drive real meaningful value out of this technology? And I'm kind of loving that because this is what we've been saying all along, right? We've been in this space for a long time. We've been using machine learning and other tools long before Gen AI came on the scene. And we've always had a stance of saying, be very careful about the hype cycle. Be very wary of the frothy excitement that comes around something new. Always be focused on business outcomes. Always be focused on real world stuff, even though almost inevitably, that is not going to lead us down the sexiest, most exciting paths of the technology. So I'm going to try and make that real today, and I'm hopefully going to try and offer some useful perspectives on moving forward from where we are today. So how am I going to do that? Real quick flash of the agenda. I'm going to give a quick little state of the union, if you will, on kind of where we are and where we aren't with the technology, what we're seeing out there as a technology provider, what our customers are telling us. I'm going to try and take a look at what is looking like it's a little more on the hype side of the equation and what is looking like it's a bit more grounded and a bit more real. I'm going to try and give a perspective on how that seems to be breaking down, at least in today's world, acknowledging that we're in a really dynamic space. And I'm going to try and give some thoughts around how you can actually approach goal setting and measurement for AI-themed initiatives, how you can really look at the value that an AI implementation of various kinds can offer and how we can prepare for those and think about value measurement and also the pitfalls, I think, and some of the ways that it's easy to get pulled a little bit aside of that. I will, because it's just a massive topic, touch on data security and information privacy in the context of AI. I don't think you can talk about it right now without talking about that, so I'm absolutely going to hit that subject. And while we're at it, let's talk about accuracy and hallucination risk. I think those things go hand in hand. This is an arena where really important practical work is being done, but we need to talk about it because it's also an area of tremendous risk. And I'm going to try and give some perspectives on partnerships, on future-proofing, as you are out there exploring different AI technologies and different potential partnerships for your organizations. I'll try and give a few thoughts on some things maybe to look for and consider within all of that. So as far as where we are, the last 6 weeks. If you've been paying attention to the news, early August, OpenAI releases GPT-5. It didn't exactly go over like they thought. Very hyped, very ballyhooed, lots of lead up to that, and a fairly disappointed consumer reaction. Now, there are some great things about GPT-5, and we're actually not really trying to throw aspersions on the tech here, but it was not what the guys on Reddit were expecting, and that's a big deal in the technology world, right? So An immediate kind of big media pickup on this and a lot of conversations is AI hitting a wall, is scaled LLM technology, is that going as far as it's gonna go? Is the bubble reaching, is there a bubble? Is the bubble reaching some sort of point? And then along with that, you may or may not have seen, I'm gonna talk about it quite a bit because it's fascinating. MIT put out a study about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, which actually caused kind of a market sell-off. A lot of AI-exposed tech stocks took a bath for a couple days. They've all come back. But they looked at a variety of projects, and a lot of headlines looked like this one: 95% of generative projects are failing. Kind of. We'll talk about what they actually looked at and what they didn't, and what that study actually said. But it is fascinating. It is worth a read. The net, guys, is this looks really different from what the AI media landscape was telling us about a year ago. And again, I think there may be something very healthy in that. I think it's worth it to take a critical look at what some of the dynamics have been, and just really, again, ask ourselves, what does it mean for this technology to create real value in our worlds? So we do at TraceGains quite a bit of research as well. We survey the industry several times a year to ask various questions about technology, various questions about what businesses are prioritizing, where they're putting focus, where they perceive risk. One of the questions that we've been asking for a couple of years now is for businesses to just rank themselves on sort of a spectrum, if you will, around AI. From, yeah, we're all in, 100%, we're all aboard, to no, we really don't see it. We're hugely skeptical. We're not putting any eggs in that basket right now. A couple of years ago, that gung-ho cohort was pretty small. It was about 10% of respondents, and about 44% were like, nah, we're not there. We're not seeing it. This year, in 2025, both of those numbers have changed quite a bit. The gung-ho group has gone from 10 to 17%. That's a pretty sizable jump. And the really skeptical group has declined to about 32%. Key thing, though, what that says to us is that better than half of everyone is still very much in the middle, right? Evaluating, interested, not certain if this is making sense for them, trying to learn about the technology, but not 100% sure which way to go. Another number that I think, though, also comes into play with this is looking at tech adoption and technical maturity in our industry as a whole. I don't think it's a secret to anybody in this room that food and beverage traditionally is not the absolute most tech-forward industry in the world. That's okay. There's obviously interest in that. When we asked executives and leaders to say, is tech adoption important to you? Is it a meaningful part of your strategy? Big majority, 82% said, yeah, this is something we care about a lot. This is something that's meaningful to us. Only about, my slide didn't advance on that one. I'm sorry, guys. Thanks. 82%, this is what I was trying to say, said it's a big priority for us. Only 6% were communicating to us, though, however, that they really felt like they were sitting in a digitally mature environment with fully digitized and integrated systems and platforms for them to work on. That's a pretty significant delta between ambition, if you will, and where the industry actually is right now. So when you sort of take these different numbers and you start putting them together, you've got definitely interest, definitely a certain amount of healthy skepticism, and still a lot of questioning on where we go, but also a big drag on the whole forward path, because at the end of the day, these are digital technologies, right? They work on digitized data. Making sure I'm advancing. And then one other number that I think fits into the mix here from the MIT data, only about 40% of companies that they surveyed in their research indicated that they had made an official or an enterprise level, if you will, LLM investment. So only a minority, big minority, but only a minority had actually taken formal steps as an organization into using specifically generative AI tools in their operation. However, this says 90%. In the text, they said essentially all of the workers they talked to indicated that they were using generative AI tools in their personal work. Who's used GPT or another LLM in the last few days? Most all of us, virtually, right? So really, really interesting delta here, right? We start to stack all these numbers together. You've got companies that are, in many cases, not quite there, and often for very good reasons, but you've got workers, individuals who are moving well out ahead of that. I tend to kind of say, if you're in that cohort where you're saying, yeah, my organization's not using AI, oh, yes, you are. But you may not be using it in ways that you're aware of, right? You may have individuals on your staff who are taking your information and plunking them into a public LLM. They may or may not, depending on how you've trained them and what dialogues you've had with them, they may or may not be aware of the information security implications of doing that. So net of all of this, kind of a scattered picture, right? We're still very much in the middle on adoption. We're kind of probably down here a little bit on tech maturity, but the individual human beings are moving faster than a lot of our organizations are, and that's something that's well worth keeping track of. Okay, so what are we learning about AI and applied AI in the industry at this point? What are some of the things we can look at to say what's working and what's really meaningful, what's moving the needle for us, versus some of the things that may be a little bit more in the domain of hype and excitement, but not necessarily paying out? This is where that MIT survey actually did find, I think, some really intriguing information. One of the things that they looked at was where are people spending money in terms of the different possibilities that are opened up by AI. And more than half of budgets in the companies that they surveyed were going to things like sales and marketing tools. They were going to market research solutions. They were going to consumer research solutions, things that were oriented around generating new revenue. Get it, right? Totally get it. Makes good sense. And yet, a lot of the most productive solutions, the solutions with the strongest ROI, were things that were more around back office automation, eliminating process outsourcing, cutting agency costs, streamlining operations behind the scenes. Very tactical, very down to earth, kind of boring, not super sexy, but this is where that study found a lot of the actual return on investment. And that's going to map very well to what we have been finding and what we've been finding as we work with our own customers. Matches our research as well. We talk to R&D teams every year. We ask them what they're prioritizing. We ask them how they are using or considering using AI. Similar deal. Market and consumer insights getting a lot of attention. Generating and testing new product ideas getting a lot of attention. Poor little automation of routine tasks down there in the bottom with the smallest actual investment so far. But it all makes sense. And it makes sense when you think a little bit about how we treat investments, right? I apologize for sort of the eye chart over here, but I would suggest that there's a little bit of natural investment bias that can creep into this, right? New revenue is exciting, new revenue is compelling, and at least on the surface, it seems very easy to measure. Now, as a marketing guy who spends a lot of time thinking about attribution, baloney, but on the surface, it looks very compelling to say, yeah, that's gonna bring me in more money. I can make that case relatively easily. Process efficiencies, on the other hand, can be harder, right? If I improve the operational efficiency of one of my units by 100%, I double it, right? I'm probably not gonna go fire half that team in the real world. I'm gonna find higher value added work for them to do. I'm gonna reallocate those people and find better things for them to work on. That's probably really good for my organization. It may or may not drop cleanly to the bottom line. And if I'm not being intentional and thoughtful ahead of time, this is a point I'm gonna come back to, about how I want to measure those efforts and what I'm anticipating getting out of them and how I'm gonna validate that, really positive efficiencies can get lost in the mix. They can be difficult to track. And I think we see this dynamic out there informing a lot of where AI money is going and also where some of the disappointment is coming in for organizations that have been early adopters on these paths. So, where's the hype? Where's the substance? At a really high summary level, just examples, but I think the notion that we're going to be able to go and look out at the market and be years in advance of consumers and have all these wonderful insights, that's probably not totally invalid, but has it proven itself in the real world in a massive way? Not necessarily so far. We'll see how that develops. And I think the expectation that a lot of organizations have had, which is that what we should be driving for are these fully autonomous decision-making engines that take humans completely out of the loop. I'm not even sure that should be a goal. It's definitely not something that we're really seeing a lot of organizations be comfortable with, and I'll talk more about that when we talk about some of the things that we're working with our customers on. I'm not sure to getting to a point where humans are not involved in critical decision-making, especially in domains like food safety, is even a place that's necessarily super desirable. I think getting humans in that loop in a really effective way might very well be where we need to continue to be focused. So what does that mean? Well, again, sort of the inverse ratio of sexy to ROI. Where are some of the things that we found? reducing supplier onboarding time, simply being able to use intelligent document processing to ingest supplier documents, accurately extract data from them, standardize and structure that data, and use it to make decisions. That can take really meaningful time out of that process. It's something we've been doing with Applied AI for a long time. Now, with the natural language processing capabilities that LLMs and Gen AI give us, that is advancing rapidly. I think the end of manual data entry may be in sight. That's a really interesting array for us. And then quality control operation. I'm going to come back to these metrics and give a little bit more context around them, but an area that we rolled out earlier this year and that we have been working closely with an early adopter community on within our customer base, some of whom are here, is around the processing of inbound certificates of analysis for lots of material arriving at the shipment dock. And traditionally, we ought to kind of stare and compare, look, is that within spec, is that outside of spec? That's difficult and time consuming, may not happen for every single shipment. That is an arena where being able to now look at those documents, read them, even if the format is unfamiliar, even if the system's never seen the document before, have very highly accurate extraction of that data, highly accurate comparison of that data. That is opening up some really interesting arenas to simply not only be more efficient, but to also expand coverage and better manage risk across that critical part of the operation. Again, I'm going to come back to these numbers because I want to give a little bit more context when I do so. But these are areas where we have been invested, and they're only a sliver of the overall landscape, right? There's much more to do. But I think this notion of using natural language power of LLMs and Gen AI to be able to simply read, process non-standard information and make it standard is incredibly powerful. We're expanding that capability, and I think you're going to see a variety of solutions arriving across the industry that are helping to do that. So let's come back to that topic of goal setting and how do we actually approach projects like this in order to understand realistically, are we getting where we want to go? Are we generating that meaningful return? Some do's and don'ts here. I'll start with the don'ts. Again, in a world full of tech sales guys, I've been one, I'm sorry. We love the big, exciting, transformative stuff and the power that the technology has, and we love to talk about it. I love to talk about it too. But it's easy to sort of fall into a domain where we're boiling the ocean. We're really trying to do big, complex projects that involve multiple silos, that require multiple people in the group that don't always work together. That starts to introduce a lot of potential friction, even into a very, very well-conceived project. Can be incredibly valuable, probably not the place to start, especially if you're just getting into the domain of AI solutions for the first time. And then secondly, a big one for me, a big red flag, look, guys, technical sophistication is never the goal here, right? We need to be focused on business outcomes. It's really cool and awesome to be able to say that we did this and implemented that. But if the technology implementation is the goal, the team is probably not focused in the right direction. We need to be thinking about what are we trying to achieve for the business by way of this technology and make sure that we're framing our goal setting around that. So some suggestions. I think a sweet spot for where a lot of contemporary AI is right now is going to be around these very measurable, high-volume, repetitive tasks that exist out there in the operation. Document entry, manual data review, things that we're doing, as I mentioned, for material lot performance. Anything where a human being is having to interact with a succession of documents or a succession of units of data and manually process or transform them in some way, nowadays may be a very, very intriguing opportunity to Applied AI. But if you're going to go there, we would recommend, and every customer that we're working with in implementing this today, we're guiding in this direction, and they're doing it as well, set some clear metrics for that. And this may, really important, this may involve benchmarking something that you have not measured previously to now. So you might want to take a step back on the current process, do some benchmark metrics around current throughput or current performance or current time spent, and just have that in your back pocket as you move forward so that you've got a valid standard of comparison. Again, when we start approaching operational efficiencies, many of the things that we can improve may not be things that we really instrument and measure accurately today. So getting ahead of that can be a key enabler here. And then we highly recommend pilot this. Start small, start with a discrete area, something that you can put good boundaries around. Give that a try, measure the outcomes, adjust accordingly, and then and only then scale and measure as you scale. So we really, really argue for a stepwise progression. It can be very rapid. It does not have to be years in the making. But I think taking these basic steps can go a long way toward establishing the confidence that you need in the organization to say, here's what we were targeting, here's what we saw, here's how we adjusted and optimized, now we feel that we're on the path that we want to be on. And I think I would argue this can be applied across a wide range of scenarios. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of just kind of the perennial boogeymen in the room here, but I think they're important to talk about because they are still big concerns. This data is from a couple of years ago. I don't think anything's changed. Leadership in many organizations, if not most, if they're smart, they have some concerns about data security as it pertains to AI. Training a large language model on your proprietary data in a way that would allow that model to expose that data to other users is a very bad outcome. And it is what will happen, by the way, if people are using your data on a publicly available LLM in uncontrolled ways. So really thinking about data security is going to be a key aspect here, and protecting your risk there is really meaningful. The good news is there are a lot of things that can be done in this domain. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but these are sample guidelines that we communicate to our customers as far as practices that we use and things that we absolutely do not use. So on the positive side of that, we maintain SOC 2 certification at all times. We just went through it this year, no exceptions. It's a big process if you've ever been through it. We do not compromise that in any way for our AI applications. So we make sure that everything that we're doing stays inside of that, and any AI usage that's inside of our tool set is exposed to the same auditing processes that everything else is. This is a baseline expectation I would argue you should have of any vendor you consider. Make sure that their AI solutions are not held to any less stringent data security standards than anything else that they do. And we keep ourselves there all the time. We also, as I kind of ranted about earlier, we do keep users in the loop. We do give users control over everything that the AI does. So you always have the option to interact. You always have the option to override. If you do override, it will learn from that. We apply machine learning to take any input that a user gives and cycle that back to make the system better and more accurate. We do make sure that customer data and supplier data is completely segregated one customer to another. That is in the core of our architecture. That data cannot be shared. It cannot move across those boundaries. And we also have, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, we've got some proprietary data structures that we built and we use that apply really meaningful knowledge to the information that's coming through to make sure that we're giving accurate results to the extent possible. We really try to be on top of hallucination. Great example was earlier today. In our world, a corrective action request or CAR should not be translated as automobile, right? That's contextual knowledge that the system needs to know. We have data structures behind the scenes that make that possible. Thank you, Sarah Jane, for that example, to be able to stay on top of that. Things we don't do, like I said, we don't train LLMs on your proprietary supplier or on any proprietary supplier or customer data ever. We just don't do it. It does not happen in our world. We don't use any partner because this is a world of matrix technology partners. We do not use any partner who does not, as I said, have the exact same data security standards in place and hasn't passed the same audits that we have. We do not allow that data to flow across customers or across suppliers, as I mentioned. And again, fundamentally, we just don't take humans out of the loop. I don't know that we ever will. We want humans to be in charge of the process. We do not want the process ever to be in charge of humans. There's more that you can do down this domain, but again, I would just really encourage conversations like this with any technology provider that you start to talk to make sure that you're providing that yourself with the comfort and the security that you need. Hallucination risk and accuracy. This is a whole presentation. I'd love to geek out on this stuff. Come to the booth. We can have lunch and talk about it. But the reality is that science of contextual engineering around AI has just absolutely grown by leaps and bounds in the last 12 or 18 months. There is so much more industry capability out there right now as far as making sure that sure is a strong word, doing as much as possible to get as close to sure as you can, that the information provided by an AI solution is accurate. Grounding that in data structures, asking the solution to cite its work and to be able to provide citations for conclusions it's coming to is very powerful. There's a whole domain now of explainability and transparency tools that are working to get out of the black box AI solution and help solutions be able to tell you not just the answer to your question, but how they came to that conclusion, the data that they used to do that. And with that, confidence scoring and ground rules for answers and confidence levels is becoming a thing. It is now possible in a lot of solutions to be able to say, okay, got your answer, but like, how sure are you? And the system can be like, that's okay, right? That's good. This is better than just, right, we're good to go when it's not actually the case. We've already talked a lot about putting humans in the loop for exceptions, making sure that humans have the ability to override and interact with any information that's coming through, and teach the system. Make sure the system is learning from human experts, not just the other way around. So as that pertains then to partnerships, as that pertains to solutions that you may consider for different parts of your business or things that you may look at, you know, the way that I would think of this is the sales guy is going to come with a whole lot of this core functionality. They're going to tell you all the things that the solution can do. They're probably telling you the truth. But you want to make sure that you're also considering the surround of all of these other things that we've really mostly talked about today, right? What kind of architecture exists around that? Does the solution provider have a roadmap that is thoughtful, that is looking not just at what's happening right now, but what is likely to happen in the next 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 months? No one knows 24 months in AI, but have they got at least a good working thesis on how they're going to stay ahead of that? Of course, you're going to talk about costs and subscription models, but understanding their data security policies and their data security governance, how they approach that. They should be very, very comfortable talking to you about what that looks like. Being able to think about usability and interface. How easy is it for you as a human user, as a human person who's going to have oversight and responsibility? How easy is it for you to work with the system? Is that simple to do, or does that require a giant learning curve? How is the system going to learn from the data that you provide it? Will the system improve over time if you give it inputs to do that? Integrations and workflows are critical here. Is that system architected in such a way that it can work with your core business workflows? Is it going to be friendly and play nice with your ERP, with your PLM, with other legacy systems that exist in your environment, and be able to work smoothly within those? Or is it going to be something that you're really going to struggle to have working in an integrated flow inside of the day's work that your folks have to do? You know, for us, kind of bringing this home a little bit, and I'll try to leave a few minutes for questions. You know, the vision fundamentally is that out there in the big world of our industry is a lot still today of fragmented, unstructured data, really critical information, stuff that you need to know, stuff that your customers need to know, but it is living in a PDF, it is living in a filing cabinet, it is on kind of one of those wonky looking printouts of a paper form that's been captured somewhere. Or it's not even in the four walls of your organization. It's out there in audit data or in regulatory data or in alert data that you have to do something to bring in. It may be living in an internal system, but not one that's easy to interface with or interact with. So all of that fragmented stuff is how we've all been operating for decades and decades. I think at the end of the day, the potential that really still is there for artificial intelligence, broadly defined, is this notion of being able to take all that non-standard stuff, very accurately extract data from it, make that data standardized and structured in a way that's easy to work with, and then enrich it with third-party data, with environmental intelligence, with whatever is important to your operation, so that data becomes a more and more powerful knowledge architecture, which can then support a whole array of things now and in the future. Once you've got that notion of a strong, contextual, structured set of data that is well organized and inside of a cogent taxonomy, sorry, I'm very, you know, in a good structure, that then can feed all sorts of other processes that are meaningful to the business and that you can gradually grow and expand on in the fullness of time. And this is where I think we move out of the hype circle and we move into things that really are the fascinating promise that the technology still has. To make it just a real world example, going back to the boring old certificates of analysis, not a sexy problem. This isn't a sexy screenshot, but this is what it looks like in our world, right? I've got a C of A over on the right-hand side. I've got all the data that has been extracted from that. I've got a little green indicator that the system considers that high confidence data, but a human is going to be here. A human is going to be able to scan through this, work through it, take a look at it, interact with it, teach the system if that needs to happen, and be able to move just much more rapidly through their decision-making process. So I threw some numbers up there earlier. I'll touch on them in a little bit more detail now. We have a wonderful case study coming out with HelloFresh, a great customer of ours, an early adopter for this technology. They've been working very closely with us. We're incredibly grateful for their participation and their transparency in working with us. Now, key piece of context for this is, as they have been growing, their ingredient portfolio has expanded 10x over the last year or so. So they've been faced with a monumental problem, which is how do I make sure that as I've got more and more ingredients from more and more sources, greater and greater complexity, coming into my facilities, that I'm able to stay on top of quality and compliance for all of that material coming through. That's the frame for some of what they found. Again, we'll have a complete report on this coming out hopefully by the end of this month. But it's processing time for C of A's coming down from multiple hours to 2 hours, right? About a 75% reduction. Being able to move successfully, again, I mentioned that volume increase from having about 4 of these guys a day to processing 150 of them per day. Big, big step function in terms of what that's actually, what's been required of them, and what the tool, just simply by accelerating those processes, has allowed them to do. Being able to expand that overall coverage across that tenfold increase in ingredient portfolio, and just keeping their operational speed and throughput in sync with that increase in the overall net complexity of their supply chain. Again, we'll have a detailed write-up on that coming out. I encourage you, and all these reports that I mentioned, by the way, are available on TraceGains.com. Come to our resource page. We'd love to be able to share more detail around all of that with you. But in their own words, working through it, the contextual automation, I've been talking a lot about context. The contextual automation offered by TraceGains IDP definitely made us more efficient. We've increased the amount of C of A's we're able to process. It's cut out the back and forth between us and suppliers. Not taking humans out of the loop, not fundamentally transforming the process, making it much faster, making it much more efficient, making it very accurate, and enabling broader coverage across a more complex ingredient portfolio. Again, the kind of unsexy problem that we want to be able to address. And I'm going a little bit long, so I'll wrap it up here. We've all seen the hype cycle probably, right? Any new technology comes in, we get really excited, we jump way up, money starts flying from venture capital firms, then you hit some issues, you hit some adjustments of expectations, you go into the trough of disillusionment. The reality, is all the great value happens on the right-hand side of this chart. And I'm personally excited that we're moving in that direction. I think it's okay to simmer down, focus in a little bit more on the nuts and bolts, and I think that's exactly where we're headed as an industry. I'm out of time, I apologize, but thank you all very, very much. Really appreciate it. Come see us at the booth. We're in the expo hall. We'd love to talk to you.